What if your negative thoughts are true? There's so much advice out there about change your negative thoughts, stop your negative thinking. You might even have people in your life who are telling you, you're too negative. You shouldn't be thinking so negatively. Or you might be very well aware of how much your negative thinking is holding you back. But what if your thoughts are realistic? Why should you change them or adjust them if they are true? And sometimes negative thoughts are valid, right? And should be listened to. So how can you tell? I'm going to help you figure this out. I'm going to give you the tools and questions so you can know whether your negative thinking is truly holding you back in life or whether it's realistic and adaptable and you need to have it. So all of us humans have tons and tons of thoughts every single day, and a good portion of them are negative. We actually have something called a negativity bias, well proven in the human brain, and it's geared to keep us safe. It's geared to protect us from danger. It helps us anticipate problems and then hopefully figure out solutions. So some of our thinking is going to be overly negative because we do have the bias to be negative, but sometimes it's also realistic. But if your negative thinking falls into a problematic category, like it's too much negative thinking, it's inflexible, somewhat rigid, and really can represent beliefs that are very negative about yourself or the world, it's also well proven that that kind of negative thinking can lead to anxiety or depression or both. It's definitely tied to the occurrence of anxiety and depression at the same time. Chronic negative thinking has been tied to poor decision-making, decreased productivity, and self-sabotaging behaviors. So those are some pretty serious consequences from chronic negative thinking. So let's talk about whether your negative thinking is realistic or not. So I'm going to share with you 6 characteristics of the problematic negative thinking, so you can think about whether your thinking falls into these categories. So number 1 is that problematic negative thinking has very common themes, almost like a broken record. Now, I know a lot of people don't have that much experience with records, but I did when I was young, and a broken record, if it's got a little skip in it, repeats. So the problematic negative thinking is like negative thoughts about yourself or the world that's on repeat. And that's why those become beliefs. So if your negative thinking has some very common themes, it could be I'm a loser, life's unfair, the world is lousy, people are not trustworthy, and these themes pop up in one situation after another. And the second characteristic of this kind of negative thinking is that it is automatic. It pops up. It doesn't take a lot of effort. You don't have to sit down and puzzle through, what really was the problem that happened there? If I was in a difficult situation, do I need to sort of sit down and really go through it? Or do I just, boom, no, it's because I'm a loser. It's because I'm stupid. It's because the world's unfair. It's automatic. It happens right away. It takes very little effort. And for some people, these thoughts are so automatic, they feel intrusive, like they can't get away from them. The thought just pops up over and over. Number 3 is that the negative thoughts are not helpful. They're disempowering. There is nothing you can do from there. They don't lead you to an action that's a solution. If you were at a social event and you said something you shouldn't have said, a faux pas, right? I definitely do this on occasion. And you walk away from that and you say to yourself, I shouldn't have said that. I need to remind myself at social events to slow down and think things through a little bit more, because sometimes I can pop out with these impulsive things. So I'm going to keep that in mind for the future. So that's a negative thought, but it doesn't fall into the pattern of being completely unhelpful. The type of negative thinking that is unhelpful would go over the situation and over it, and I'd probably be labeling myself. I'm rude, I'm stupid, people don't like me, nobody likes me, I will never be able to overcome having done that, right? It gets worse and worse and worse. So the kind of negative thinking that leaves you powerless because, well, if I'm just stupid, then there's nothing I can do about that. I'm just stupid. Or if I'm just rude, that's just inherently who I am. Can't do anything about it, right? So I might as well just sort of crawl into a hole in my room. So it doesn't lead us to a productive action. The fourth characteristic, and this one is really key. This can really help you identify whether your negative thinking falls into this very problematic category. And number 4 is that the thinking is very distorted. It uses absolutes. It uses always or never. It uses you statements or the world is. It's an absolute. The world is lousy. Life is unfair. They're very definitive, absolute statements. There's no nuance. There's no real sort of sophisticated analysis happening. I'm worthless. It's just a blanket statement. The statements, the thinking is completely one-sided. And this is where the concept of cognitive distortions can come in. And I'm not going to go through every cognitive distortion because that's for a different video. But the cognitive distortions will be evident in the language you're using in your negative thinking. So if you identify what those themes are and you write them down, write down the common themes that seem to recur that are sort of automatic, reactive. They come from a place of reactivity. They will probably have the cognitive distortions of catastrophizing or magical thinking, thinking that you know what other people are thinking. Labeling, right? That's those you statements. Labeling is a cognitive distortion. And even if you can't really take in that the distorted beliefs that you might have are really not true, they're really not. But even if it's hard for you to take that in, to just open up a little bit of thinking, to say, okay, cognitive distortions have been pretty well proven through lots of research and lots of study of the human brain and how we think about things. And distorted means it's distorted. It's not true. So if I'm using cognitive distortions in my negative thinking, let me at least open my brain up a little bit to say, okay, maybe it really isn't true and I am just stuck in it. And it's that type of willingness that really will help you change this in the long run. Number 5 is that these thoughts are believable to you. They are so believable that it is really hard for you to question them. You might just accept these as facts about yourself and the world. You may not even be led to question them until people start telling you to question them. And then you might think, well, that's totally unrealistic, which is why you're watching this video, right? Or you might know this is probably distorted and I should question it, but I really can't because I believe it so firmly. So I talk about this in a video that I recently released that I would highly recommend you watch, which is called Overcome Limiting Beliefs. And I do have a section in there where I talk about the clients I had when I was a psychotherapist. And I had many clients over 20 years who held these negative beliefs about themselves so intently they would argue with me about them. And I talk a little bit about why that is and where that comes from in that video. But basically, negative statements on repeat equal beliefs. And I guess your beliefs can come from having that negative thinking on repeat, but probably those beliefs developed very, very early, which is one reason it's really hard to question them. The earlier this stuff developed, the more ingrained it is in the older parts of your brain, the emotional brain. It's kind of like our subconscious. It's hard to access, but it's just automatically there. Okay, I'm going to share with you the 6th characteristic, and then I'm going to run through a couple of questions that reflect these characteristics to help you think about your thinking. But before that, I want to share 2 things. One is that I have a free PDF on Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs. And negative core beliefs are almost always at the root of negative thinking. And this PDF helps you identify what that core belief is for you, why it might have developed, and gives you some techniques to transform it. And then I also have a free webinar, and I'm going to show both of these here on the screen, put the links in the description to the video. The free webinar is called Rewire Your Brain for Joy and Confidence. And I talk a lot in there about this negativity bias that we have and about how our brains kind of get trained through our patterns and some life experiences in a way that can really hold us back. And it kind of creates these grooves in our brain that you can rewire. So encourage you to utilize both of those resources. Okay, number 6 characteristic of the problematic negative thinking is that it's rigid. Rigidity of thought has been tied to really people being unhappy and not finding solutions. The healthiest kind of thinking is flexible. It adapts to situations and changing information, changing experiences. It's open, and most repetitive negative thinking is very rigid. This is how it is, and anybody who doesn't believe this is wrong and stupid and naive. Anyone who doesn't believe that the world is a lousy place and nobody's trustworthy is naive, and they shouldn't think that way, and they're going to get in trouble. It's like very rigid. There's no room for other opinions. There's no room to say, maybe my thoughts aren't quite true. Maybe the beliefs that have developed from my thoughts have been biased. So if you can identify that rigidity in your thinking, that helps to point to you that, yeah, this is a problem, and you can, again, open your mind to a possibly different way of thinking that could improve your life. Okay, some questions to help you think about your thinking. That's called metacognition, and it's a great tool for distancing from our thoughts enough to analyze them. And I'm going to come out with a video in the next few weeks on cognitive diffusion. So cognitive fusion is fusing with your thoughts, becoming one. That's when your thoughts feel so strong, their beliefs, and how cognitive diffusion can help. So make sure you subscribe, hit that like button if you like this video, but I'm still going to walk you through these questions. But these can help you move towards that diffusion, move towards a place where you'll begin to realize, maybe I don't have to see the world this way. Okay, first question. How familiar are these thoughts? When did you first have these thoughts? Was there an initial incident that led you to thinking this way about yourself or the world? Or have you kind of just always thought this way? Like before, but when you were pre-verbal, you were already thinking this way. And the reason to ask that question is that if we have a trauma in our life, and it could be a big T trauma, a major trauma, or it could be a little t trauma. It could also be neglect in childhood or things that might not rise to the level where you feel like it should have had a huge impact on you. But repetitive, what therapists could call little t traumas in childhood, particularly if they happen very early, they can cause us to have negative thoughts about ourselves or the world that are almost subconscious. They're so deeply ingrained in there, it's like, I've always known this about myself and I've always known it about the world. Then those probably are those deep negative core beliefs that I was mentioning earlier. And if that's not where this came from, but there was a particular incident that triggered this way of thinking, which could have been, again, a big T trauma or a little t trauma, again, it's something that caused you to develop a negative belief, and that negative belief got pervasively applied in your life. It's very common for this to happen, and people don't really fully understand the connection until they go through therapy or do the self-help work. So that's a really important question. Where did this belief come from? And if you feel like, well, so many experiences have reinforced this belief, that is because these beliefs do become reinforcing, because the beliefs impact how we behave impacts what we're experiencing, what we're feeling. It's how we're interpreting the world, so then the belief gets reinforced more and more. And then the last two questions for you to explore, which are connected, is, are you able to see this situation from multiple perspectives? Are you able to see that somebody might have a different view of you or a different view of the world that is valid? Can you see the things that are happening in your life from many different perspectives? Because that would indicate a flexibility, of thinking. And connected to that is the story that you're telling yourself with these negative thoughts, does it give you the power to act? Is it an empowering story or a disempowering story? Okay, so I'm about to work on a video about how to challenge your negative thinking, like what's the solution here? So this video is mainly focused on helping you identify whether you should consider changing your negative thinking, whether you should consider these thoughts as false, as not valid. I'm hoping you've come to the conclusion of yes, so that you can then change it, live a happier life. And my next video coming out, again, hit that subscribe button and notification will notify you when the next video is out about how to change this, what to do to live a happier life. And one of the tools we've already talked about in this video is watching our thoughts, is observing them, analyzing them. So you can watch the thought instead of watching the world through those thoughts. Okay, I truly hope this was helpful. Please comment below, let me know, and I'll see you next week.